US President Donald Trump has just obliterated a Somali ISIS leader in a devastating airstrike. Unleashing the power of America's F-18 Super Hornets, Trump has just sent a clear message to the terrorists that are attempting to make Somalia their safe haven. You can't run from the US. Better yet, the strike was conducted in conjunction with Somalia's leadership and serves as more evidence that ties are deepening between the US and what could become one of its most important African allies. So what happened during the strike? Why attack ISIS in Somalia in the first place? And why is this strike so important to America's efforts to forge a stronger relationship with Somalia? On February 1st, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth released a statement via the US Department of Defense's website, confirming that US Africa Command had conducted an aerial strike in Somalia. The details he provided were brief. Hegseth said that the strike was conducted under Trump's direction and in coordination with the federal government of Somalia, with the target being ISIS Somalia operatives hiding out in the Golis Mountains. The strike was successful, says Hegseth. Multiple ISIS Somalia operatives were killed in the aerial bombardment, possibly including a key ISIS leader, and the strike was carried out with no civilian casualties. This action further degrades ISIS's ability to plot and conduct terrorist attacks threatening US citizens, our partners, and innocent civilians, wrote Hegseth in his statement. He also noted that it showcases how the US is always ready to eliminate terrorists wherever they may be, even as it focuses on border protection operations under Trump's leadership. It was a somewhat bombastic statement, and the bombast continued when President Trump announced the strikes. Writing on Truth Social, America's president said, "These killers, who we found hiding in caves, threaten the United States and our allies. The strikes destroyed the caves they live in and killed many terrorists without in any way harming civilians." Trump also delivered a less diplomatic version of the message Hegseth sent to ISIS Somalia. "We will find you and we will kill you." By this point, it's clear that the US conducted an early February attack against ISIS Somalia. However, there's a question that neither Trump nor Hegseth's statements answer. How? Beyond confirming that the US used an airstrike to take out the Somalian terrorists, precious few details have emerged from America's government regarding the specifics of the strike. Those details instead came from a former US pilot named Ward Carroll. A graduate of the US Naval Academy, Carroll is a veteran who spent 15 years flying F-14 Tomcats for the US before retiring to become an author. The Naval Institute Press named him its Author of the Year for his 2001 novel Punk's War, which he later followed up with other books named Punk's Fight and Punk's Wing. Carroll delivered the specifics of the ISIS Somali strike on his YouTube channel. He noted that the strike included the USS Harry S. Truman, which is one of America's most impressive aircraft carriers, and takes part in missions around the world to preserve maritime security, offer crisis response, and engage in counterterrorism. Before the Somali strike, the ship was operating in the Red Sea, where it was helping the US to counter ship raiding threats posed by the Houthis in that region. However, as of late February 2025, the USS Harry S. Truman has been tracked in the Sea of Crete, suggesting a shift in its operational deployment. But in late January, the ship was sent to the waters near Somalia to take part in the first airstrike President Trump has ordered since taking office. Carroll says the strike was approved on January 30th, when Senior Director for Counterterrorism Sebastian Gorka and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz presented the plan to Trump. Their goal was to go after the ISIS Somali leader the US believes has been responsible for recruitment in the country. The idea was simple: take out the leader and you destroy ISIS Somalia's recruitment efforts. This man has recruited terrorists from around the world, trained them to kill innocents, and deployed them back to the West to execute jihadi attacks in more than one nation, Gorka reportedly told Trump. Convinced by that argument, Trump broke out his black Sharpie and signed the order. The US would strike against the ISIS Somali leader. On February 1st, Trump's national security team took their places in the White House Situation Room at around 0950 Red Sea time, according to Carroll. They watched and waited as 16 fighter jets took off from the USS Harry S. Truman. Those 16 jets were all F-18 Super Hornets, with some being the single-seater F-18E variants of the jet, with the rest being the two-seater F-18Fs. Both planes pack devastating firepower. Introduced into the US military in 1999 as replacements for the F-14 Tomcats Carroll spent his career flying, both versions of the Super Hornet are twin-engine tactical jets capable of completing multiple mission types. Each Super Hornet costs $67.4 million to build, meaning Trump dedicated just over $1 billion of hardware to his first airstrike. The jets can reach airspeeds of Mach 1.8 or higher and have combat ceilings over 50,000 feet. They also have impressive ranges, with the Super Hornet being capable of flying 1,275 nautical miles when primed for combat and 1,660 nautical miles when used for ferrying purposes. However, it's the armaments that make the Super Hornet so dangerous. Each comes loaded with an M61A1 or A2 Vulcan 20mm cannon, along with an AIM-9 Sidewinder and an AIM-9X missile. The aircraft can also carry the AIM-7 Sparrow and the AIM-120 AMRAAM, along with the Harpoon, HARM, and SLAM munitions. Add Maverick missiles, Joint Direct Attack munitions, and Joint Standoff weapons to that loadout and you have an aerial death-dealing machine. Trump unleashed 16 of these Super Hornets against ISIS Somalia's recruitment leader. The Super Hornets dropped precision-guided munitions on 10 targets, the majority of which were caves located in the semi-autonomous region of Puntland. The strike was successful, leading to the explosive results being shared by Trump and Hegseth in the statements we discussed earlier. No Super Hornets were shot down, with all returning safely to the USS Harry S. Truman before making their way back toward the Red Sea. It was an extremely impressive strike, but we come to a key question: why did it have to happen at all? To answer that question, we need to dig deeper into ISIS Somalia and the threat it poses both to the United States and Somalia itself. ISIS rose to prominence during the 2010s, according to the BBC, with most of its members being stationed in Syria and Iraq at the time. However, America's focus on eliminating the group forced it to migrate, with the majority of ISIS presence now being restricted to the African continent. The ISIS Somalia branch is among the most prominent of these scattered forces. It was formed in 2015 by defectors from al-Shabaab, which is an al-Qaeda-affiliated group that is the largest jihadist force in Somalia. Since that formation, ISIS Somalia has developed a reputation for strong-arming locals, extorting them for cash, and carrying out sporadic and small-scale attacks, primarily against the Somalian government. The US Director of National Intelligence, or DNI, classifies ISIS Somalia as a foreign terrorist organization. It says that the group adheres to ISIS's strict interpretation of Islamic law, with its goal being to extend the ISIS caliphate deeper into Africa. DNI also offers more details about the operations the group conducts, noting that it's been responsible for multiple close-quarters assassinations and improvised explosive device operations since its formation. Though the group's pace of attack slowed in 2021, thanks in large part to opposition from Puntland's regional security forces, it's still active and occasionally raids settlements in Puntland for resources and money. Even more details about the group and the threat it presents came from a September 2024 article published by the International Crisis Group, or ICG. It says that recent years have seen ISIS Somalia manage to beat back its main rivals al-Shabaab, meaning the splinter group has become quite powerful. ISIS Somalia has also established itself as a key component of ISIS's wider logistical and financial networks, likely backed by the group's extortion efforts, meaning it has the potential to develop into a hub that supports future Africa-based ISIS groups. The threat ISIS Somalia poses is small, at least when compared to other terrorist groups. Before Trump's strikes, the group was believed to have around 500 members, all scattered around the Kal-Miskat Mountains in Puntland. ICG also notes that about half of the membership is foreign, with many who join the group coming from East African countries like Ethiopia and Tanzania, or from Arab countries like Yemen. Therein lies a key threat posed by ISIS Somalia. While the group itself operates in a fairly small region of Somalia, it's attracting members from multiple continents. Through those recruitment efforts, it has the capacity to train non-Somalian terrorists and potentially help them to form new versions of ISIS in their own countries. Interestingly, ISIS Somalia combines its terroristic raids against the people of Puntland with occasional community projects designed to help it win support among local people. ICG reports that the group's members have worked to drill boreholes and distribute food to the people in the region's small villages. Though these community outreach efforts are rare, they showcase that ISIS Somalia is willing and able to influence public sentiment, likely with the goal of recruiting more members. So the group is small, but it's also growing in power. It's also been a thorn in the side of Puntland's regional security forces for quite some time. As we mentioned earlier, Puntland is a semi-autonomous region within Somalia. Formed in 1998, it has a population of around 4.3 million people and is a federal member of the Somalia state. Puntland has been involved in a low-intensity conflict with ISIS Somalia for almost a decade and have cleared more than 200 kilometers, or approximately 124 miles of territory, of their presence since this operation began, according to one of the region's officials. Trump's airstrike was part of a month-long operation in Puntland to damage ISIS Somalia's recruitment efforts, which came on the back of the terrorist group carrying out an attack against those forces in December 2024 that left over 20 people dead. So the goal of Trump's strike appears to be helping Somalia, along with Puntland, to rid itself of ISIS Somalia. The aerial attack also came just a day after Somali President Hassan Sheikh Mohammed appealed to Trump via a Washington Post interview not to pull out the American advisors and consultants who are supporting the training of our special forces. In other words, Somalia wants to maintain strong ties with the US, with Trump's airstrike being his way of showing America's support. But there may be another reason why Trump ordered the strike. It allows him to appear superior to former US President Joe Biden. In his Truth Social statements regarding the attack, Trump took a swipe at the previous administration, claiming that Biden and his cronies hadn't acted quickly enough to get the job done in Somalia. I did, Trump proudly proclaimed, though his comments weren't strictly accurate. As the BBC reports, Biden had previously ordered an operation that saw the US eliminate the IS leader Bilal al-Sudani, along with 10 of his closest operatives, in the mountainous caves north of Somalia back in 2023. Biden also reversed a decision Trump made to pull out troops of Somalia toward the end of his first stint as president. So Trump's accusations of Biden doing nothing to help Somalia are inaccurate. Still, they allow him to position the airstrike as a major political win, as well as an important attack against Somalia's terroristic elements. And more of those attacks against ISIS Somalia are already happening. Granted, they're not being conducted by Trump or the United States. However, Trump's airstrike appears to have paved the way for the Puntland Regional Security Forces to further weaken ISIS Somalia's strongholds. On February 3rd, just 2 days after Trump's airstrikes, Somalian police and state media announced the capture of a senior ISIS Somalia commander named Abdirahman Shewak Sasid. He surrendered from the same Kalmiskard mountains that Trump targeted with his airstrike, suggesting that the damage caused has left ISIS Somalia in disarray. Sasid is a big get for the Somalian authorities, as he was the leader of ISIS Somalia's assassination squad, as well as being in charge of many of the group's money-raising local extortion efforts. So recruitment is down thanks to the Trump strikes, and that's paved the way for Somalia to arrest one of ISIS Somalia's key operational heads. Beyond that, Puntland security officials are conducting aerial strikes of their own. On February 12th, Puntland counter-terrorism operations attacked the same mountains Trump targeted almost 2 weeks before. 2 airstrikes that took place tonight in the Shebab area of the Kalmiskard Mountains killed more than 30 ISIS terrorists, the counter-terrorism group claimed. It also noted that most of those terrorists were foreigners, with the strike also destroying one of ISIS Somalia's supply vehicles. That airstrike followed a coordinated air and ground operation that saw Puntland's regional security forces kill a further 60 ISIS Somalia terrorists. Remember that this is a group that numbered around 500 before Trump's airstrike. During the first 2 weeks of February, those numbers have been slashed by around a fifth, with it all starting thanks to Trump's decision to strike ISIS Somalia's cavern bases. These are all wins for the Trump administration, as he can point to his airstrike as being effective, as well as potentially using it as leverage to pull American troops out of Somalia. It will be an interesting tactic if it's the one Trump follows. The US comes in and causes major damage against threats in a foreign country. That leaves the door open for the militaries and security forces in those countries to conduct their own cleanup operations, allowing Trump to bring more American soldiers home. However, it may not be the specific strategy Trump follows. Why? Well, Somalia is more valuable to the United States than many people realize, with that value giving us the final reason why Trump ordered his airstrike. The US established diplomatic relations with the African state back in 1960. The relationship hasn't always been smooth. In 1969, an internal coup replaced Somalia's government with a pro-Soviet regime, though Somalia again started to turn towards the west following a devastating war with Ethiopia during the 1970s. Civil war then racked the country for much of the 1990s and 2000s, resulting in the US closing its embassy in the country in 1991. That embassy reopened in 2018. Both before and since that reopening, the United States has heavily invested time, energy, and money into helping Somalia become politically and economically stable. Those monetary investments include over $3 billion of humanitarian aid delivered since 2006, along with $253 million of what the US State Department calls development assistance, dedicated to helping Somalia achieve stability and create a formal economy. The US also cancelled $1.1 billion of Somalian debt owed to America as part of a series of measures that saw several of Somalia's creditors forgiving debts that totaled $4.5 billion at the time. Again, achieving internal economic stability in Somalia was the goal. These investments alone wouldn't be enough of a reason for Trump to want to dedicate American firepower to ensuring Somalia maintains its sovereignty. America's president has shown isolationist tendencies in the past, as demonstrated by his desire to end the Ukraine war, which is partially rooted in wanting to limit America's financial contributions to Ukraine. However, Trump will help other nations when he believes there's a chance that aid could benefit the United States in the long run. In Somalia's case, those potential benefits are twofold: access to the country's natural resources and a greater opportunity to project US power in the African continent. Right now, trade between the US and Somalia is limited. America exported around $85 million worth of goods to the country in 2022, while importing just $1.1 million worth of products. That's small potatoes compared to America's trade relationships with many of its other allies. However, Somalia is home to an array of untapped resources, including natural gas, iron ore, copper, and salt. It also has oil, with the Puntland region alone believed to have the potential to produce between 5 and 10 billion barrels of this valuable resource. Somalia's government recognizes this and has granted licenses to companies from Australia and China to work on finding and extracting these resources. Trump recognizes the value Somalia's land holds, which means he may be supporting the country now to clear the way for American companies to snap up some of those licenses. Getting rid of the ISIS-Somalia threat makes it safer to operate in Puntland, which ultimately means there's a potential for some profit to be made in the future. Beyond setting the foundation for future trade, Trump may also have the African continent on his mind. By continuing Biden's policies of investment in Somalia, whether that be through military protection, financial aid, or both, the US gains a valuable foothold in Africa. An America-friendly Somalia would also allow the US to deepen its security ties with neighboring Somaliland, which isn't currently internationally recognized as a nation. Somaliland declared its independence from Somalia 33 years ago, after the latter descended into civil war, and has essentially functioned as a nation-state since. In some regions of Somaliland, Trump is seen as a savior who will be the key to granting the territory its desired status as a sovereign nation. Trump has an opportunity to align Somalia and Somaliland under the same American banner. That would deepen America's ties with other African countries, including Ethiopia, and give Trump access to Somaliland's strategic location on the Gulf of Aden. That location would allow the US to maintain eyes on the conflicts currently broiling in Ethiopia and Sudan, in addition to allowing it to tackle the remaining ISIS-Somalia and al-Shabaab forces in Somalia. The Atlantic Council also says that having access to the Gulf of Aden would enable the US to ease some of the military congestion in its main African base in Djibouti, allowing it to do a better job of making the Red Sea more secure. Trump has to tread a careful path if this is his ambition. Moving too quickly in any of these regions, Somalia and Somaliland especially, creates a risk of destabilization. It could also anger the likes of Egypt, Turkey, and the African Union, especially if Trump recognizes Somaliland as an independent country. However, that anger might be assuaded if tactics like the February airstrike against ISIS-Somalia bring Somalia and Somaliland under the US banner. A path would open to negotiations, which would lead to peace between the two territories that would ultimately benefit the United States. One thing is for certain, Trump has just taken a massive bite out of the ISIS-Somalia organization. In doing so, he set the stage for Puntland security forces to further damage the terrorist organization. And if everything works out in Trump's favor, he may have just taken the first step toward allying with Somalia and Somaliland to give America access to precious resources and an extremely important strategic location. But what do you think about Trump's airstrike? Was it necessary considering the relatively small size of ISIS-Somalia? Do you think Trump will continue to support Somalia in the future? Let us know in the comments, and thank you for watching the video. Now go and check out how SEAL Team 6 obliterated Somali pirates, or click this other video instead.